election revitalized the city and comforted the nation following the terrorist attacks of September 11th. He went on to manage one of the largest security consulting firms in the world, and most recently, he served as President Trump's personal attorney. Mayor Giuliani's success as a public servant, where he impacted the lives of millions, solidified his legacy as one of the most consequential public figures in American history. Now he's hosting 2 hit live stream shows every night from 7 to 9 p.m. This one, The Rudy Giuliani Show, on X and on Newsmax 2, and also on Lindell TV at 7 p.m. Everybody, welcome. Please join us in welcoming Mayor Rudy Giuliani. We're going to let Mayor Giuliani talk about whatever he feels like talking about tonight, and in a little while we'll start taking questions from the audience, Mayor, that you can answer, okay?
Absolutely.
Okay, sounds
Enjoy doing that. I enjoy taking questions more than speaking because I know what I'm going to say, but I don't know what you're going to ask. It's a lot more informative. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to the club. And let me tell everyone who's watching it that we're in the Trump International Golf Course in West Palm Beach, and we're in the room that is used often for, well, I guess the biggest event here recently was the Super Bowl, right? And also on Sunday nights, during the season, there's a dinner here, and when the president is in town, he attends. And then on the other side is the golf course, which is magnificent. So I really thank you very much. This venue means a lot to me also. Also, I want to thank you because all of you were very active in the election for quite some time. We worked very, very hard on it. This was an effort that involved lots of people, lots of dedicated people. And the reason we won is because we had more dedicated people than they did. Politics in America is so close now in terms of the division that the more enthusiasm you have, well, that's going to probably make the difference. And that's what he always had. By him, I mean President Trump. Always had enthusiasm edge. Even in the election that they say he lost. The enthusiasm in 2020 was remarkable. Even going down to the last 2 weeks before the election, I don't know if you remember, they both went to Pennsylvania, and Biden went to his hometown, and about 23 people showed up at a broken down old drive-in movie. And about half of them were beeping their horns. And Dodo, that's what I called the former president, Dodo thought that they were beeping their horns, in support of him. They were actually Trump supporters who were beeping their horns so nobody would hear him. And but he was very excited, and I'm sure the first stepmother, his wife, she basically told him that was showed they really loved me. I don't know in retrospect if we realize the fraud that they perpetrated on us. The frauds. Put the election counting aside. Even put aside the hard drive, which they did. What about the fact that he was completely non-compass menace in one of the most important jobs in the world? I mean, the man has a button that would allow him to destroy the world. And I can tell you, having worked for President Ronald Reagan, the greatest fear that he had was that if that button ever got into the hands of an irrational person. And today, I don't know if heard President Trump's press conference. But I thought it was one of the most eloquent and one of the wisest observations about the position the world is in that I've heard since Ronald Reagan or John Kennedy. Because they were the two presidents that seemed to me understood the danger of the world we live in. They both were consumed with the fear that we could destroy the world. And President Reagan would express it this way. By the time he came into office, here's how we kept the peace. Mutually assured destruction, also known as NAM. Mutually assured destruction meant that we weren't going to go to war against Russia, because if we did, they would go to war against us. They wouldn't go to war against us because we would go to war against them, and the end result is we'd all be dead. The world would be over. Well, as President Reagan used to say, that first of all seems like a horribly immoral way to keep the peace. It certainly doesn't have you on a high plane thinking about all the wonderful things that you can do to make the world better. Basically, you're keeping it together by extraordinary fear. But even worse than that, that all falls apart if one of those two men is irrational or insane. Then the world is gone. Have you ever taken a good look lately at the Ayatollah? I kind of fits that category to me, right? He convinces people that if they give their life for the jihadist cause, they're going to go to paradise. He is an extremely orthodox Muslim, which means he believes in the most rigid interpretation of the Quran, which is that if you die in pursuance of trying to create an Islamic empire, you go straight to paradise, where you were greeted by, depending on your interpretation of the language, 72 or 79 virgins. Now, there are two problems with that. Basically, half of us are men, half of us are women. Kind of a little strange that all the men are going to be 72 virgins. I don't know where they're going to come from. And as 79 wives once observed, nobody has ever told the men what these 72 virgins look like. But, you know, finally, would you ever consider that over the last year and a half, Israel done a pretty good job of killing a lot of the jihadists, right? We've been wiping them out left and right in Gaza, in Lebanon, Syria, you know, a little bit in Iran, down in Yemen. I mean, not too many left. So, I don't know if the Ayatollah he wants to die. But he certainly is irrational. And I think that's why every president, except for Obama and Biden, would say, under no circumstances should Iran become nuclear. It is different when you are an insane, theocratic cult, which is what they really are. Iran is run by a religious ideology, which is equally, it's as evil as Nazism or communism. It is as anti-Semitic as Nazism. And maybe even more in the sense that it's a tenet of the religion. If you read it that way, that Muhammad instructed them to kill Jews. He instructed them to kill Christians because there were two Muhammads. The early Muhammad, which they love to quote and talk about, where he talks about how it's a continuation of the Abrahamic religion. Judaism Christianity, and then the Muslim religion. And then after Muhammad had his revelation from the angel Gabriel, who took him to heaven, paradise they call it, he came back and he tried to convince the people of Medina that they should convert to his new religion, which was the completion of Judaism and Christianity. Now, they didn't believe him. His Arab brothers and sisters thought he was possessed by the devil. Now, that may be true, but actually he had epilepsy. And of course, they didn't understand epilepsy that day. So as he was preaching, he would have an epileptic seizure, and they would say, of course we're not going to follow you. Plus, they had a hard time believing that the angel Gabriel took them to heaven. They, having not succeeded with the Arabs, he either went to the Jews or the Christians next. I don't remember exactly the order, but the end result was the same. They rejected him. So he thought for sure that he was going to convince the Jews and the Christians. This was a perfect completion of their. Instead, they thought he was also insane. And the Arabs threw him out. Listen to the trouble. They threw him out of Medina, they threw him out to the desert. And he spent 20 years in the desert preaching to the uneducated, illiterate Bedouin, who didn't reject him. They bought him. And they weren't going to let him back in any of the cities, so he developed an army. And he became a general. He became a terrorist general. Killed thousands and thousands of people. Would go into a town, kill the elders to get the attention of the town, and then force you to be Muslim. That's how the religion was spread. It's the reason Salman Rushdie, almost was killed. That trial is going on right now. So that's the reality of it. And that's the world that we live in. So President Trump today, I would urge you to go listen to his press conference today. In a very, very serious way, he talked about how much responsibility is on him, Putin, and to some extent, Chairman Xi, because they are, certainly he and Putin, whether Xi has nuclear weapons that can destroy the world, he's sure that heck he gets pretty close to that. And that somehow, we've got to figure out how to settle these wars, and then we've got to move on to figuring out how we get rid of nuclear weapons. Last person who talked about that was Ronald Reagan. The person before that was John Kennedy. The rest of them weren't big enough to talk. By big enough, I mean they weren't intellectually or morally big enough to talk. A job like president or a job like mayor or can have you become, even if you're good at it, an automaton. You do whatever has to be done that day, and you get through it. And then if you like parties and you like, you spend all your time doing that. Or it can be a mission where you superimpose on it what your vision is, what you want it to be. That's what creates a leader. And I'm really distinguishing between an average or a pretty good president and a great one. We have a great president. And even though I don't know how to evaluate this, and this is a very, I think it's a helpful evaluation, although somewhat unrealistic. I think a lot of people feel that although we went through terrible 4 years, and there was no assurance that it would work out right until it happened, that it actually worked out better. That he's better prepared, and the country is better prepared for him. I think all that's right. Very hard to evaluate, though, because an awful lot of people died that didn't have to die had he been elected in 2020. When he says that the war in Ukraine would not have taken place, that's almost obvious. He pointed it out today very quickly, but I've pointed it out over and over again, which is that Putin attacked 3 times under the last 4 presidents. Bush in southern Russia, Georgia. Obama, when he took Crimea. And then, of course, under Biden. Somebody's missing it. The 4 years of Trump. And I think in order to be a troublemaker, Putin actually pointed that out recently. And actually said, nah, I didn't attack when Trump was there. There's a reason for that, and you have to try to understand Putin if you're going to negotiate and deal with him. Putin is as evil as you can imagine. He's a stone-cold killer. But he's an extraordinarily smart man. He's a great tactician. And believe it or not, he's very careful. He's not like Hitler, who may have been insane also. I don't think you'd have Putin, creating a 2-front war when he's got Europe under control and he decides to attack Russia. Putin is a very cautious, careful man. And that's why he attacked what he did. He attacked under Bush in Georgia because Bush at the time was very weakened by all of the people who turned against him because of the Iraq war. We won the war, we won it quickly, and then we lost the occupation. And he became very unpopular, but fair, unfair. He was a weakened president. And when he made a switch between his first and second term, he created a weaker administration. Weaker in terms of militarily prepared to defend us. Somewhat more hesitant about it. So he noticed that, Putin did. He also noticed that Bush was very distracted by all of that. And his action in Georgia would have been hard for us to really contest very heavily because it is internal. And he did have a significant Islamic extremist problem in southern Georgia. Remember, they destroyed an entire school of Russian children. And that whole area, which is where the Boston Marathon bombers came from, is a hotbed of Islamic extremism that he has to deal with. So that was a questionable one as to whether there was any basis for us to really intervene in that. Obama, he waited really until Obama proved to him that he would, I'm not sure Obama would have defended America under any circumstance, or for any reason. I have a horrible view of Obama. I think Obama was a trained communist that was put there to accelerate what a certain portion of the Democratic Party had been wanting to do to us since Woodrow Wilson, which is to make us a communist country. And he was probably the one most aware of it and trained for that purpose. And he subscribes to the form of communism, the revised form of communism, where so Marx and Engels created a division based upon rich and poor, proletariat and bourgeoisie. It was all over money. And they tried to spread it in the West that way. But it was very, very hard. In America, we just don't have, even during the Depression, we don't have that kind of poverty. We have poverty, but compared, as any of you have travel the world compared to the poverty in India, or in parts of China, or in Africa. You know, in fact, the only place in our hemisphere that has that kind of poverty is Haiti. Some brilliant Marxists decided, under the direction of a professor named Gramsci, who was Italian and American at Columbia, that they should use race as the dividing line, and then even better, oppressed and oppressor. Biden's form of communism is colonizing. Remember when he first came into the White House, he got rid of Winston Churchill's bus.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to, if he wasn't the president, I'd have gone there and hit him in the head with the bus. He's one of my great heroes. And I don't think we would have negotiated our way through that war without him, more so than any of our leaders. But in any event, he got rid of that because Churchill was a colonist. Yeah, he saved the Western world, but he was a colonist. But Obama has no appreciation for the Western world, because communists don't. It was a sure sign that he was a very well-trained communist. In fact, his book about his father is written by a communist. So, we looked at him and said, there's a president like this. He's not going to do anything. It was a very safe invasion. We're not going to do the same thing with Biden. The problem for President Trump now is it's been done. If you were going to stop them from taking a significant part of Ukraine, you had to do it before they came in. We had to make a decision back then. Was it worth committing our troops at the border to stop them, or NATO, or not? Having come in, or we should have given them the arms they needed to expel them at the beginning of the war. I don't have an answer precisely what the Biden administration was doing in Ukraine. On the one hand, they were going to defeat Russia, stop Russia, not let them spread, and save the Ukrainian people. At the same time, they never gave them the weapons to do that. By the way, Obama didn't either. When Russia invaded in 2014, he actually never gave them weapons. First person to actually give them weapons was Donald Trump. I was told that by the president of the Ukraine, who was a massive crook, but an angry massive crook. So there's a very strange thing going on, which makes settling it very difficult. So we're going to take a break, and I'm going to tell you how I think it's going to get settled. Then you can ask me questions. And then touch on Israel for a moment, because I think Saturday is a terribly important day. Terribly important day. So we can talk while they're doing advertising.
This is for the channel. The Newsmax. Yeah. I'm trying.
What happened Saturday?
What do you do like this? Doesn't, you know, it's like down. You know, Van and the other van.
Okay, we're going to go back on in 2 minutes. 2 minutes. There's coffee down there if you want, some desserts. But otherwise, get right back in your seats. We're going back on, and in 10 minutes, we're going to start asking the mayor questions. So I'll be walking around the room, and whoever would like to ask a question, just raise your hand, and you'll get up, give you the microphone, you'll state your name, and then you'll ask your question. Okay? No long
No long-winded stuff. Not at all.
What is the main thing?
Okay, one more minute.
Talk about like
Communism?
since you are Brazilian, yeah. I'm gonna talk about yeah.
No, I mean because
No, don't be so.
what do you think about what's going on Should I do this in
When I
question?
do
I
my
already asked
question.
myself. I'm gonna do my question.
Okay, so
What do you think of what's going on?
when I do my question, just take me in your phone.
How do you ask? How do you ask? How do you ask? How do you ask? What do I do?
She'll come to you.
What is your opinion about what is happening with freedom of speech?
And the relationship during Trump administration, and you can do it in your own.
Liberties. They're taking away the liberties of the freedom of speech.
Okay, everybody, 5 seconds. Please sit down or stay quiet.
Hush!
Well, welcome back to America's Mayor Live, which is being brought to you from Long Beach, Florida, at the Trump International Golf Course. And this is a meeting of the America First Club. Rebecca Herrera and Warren Maaloof are the executives of the time. So I'm going to finish what I was saying so we can get to questions and answers that will satisfy what you're most interested in. In addition to having, it's amazing, this weekend he has a whole large number of his foreign policy staff trying to deal with Ukraine. I think that'll be in Munich. They're going to be doing that. I think he's going to go to a meeting in Saudi Arabia next week.
Woo!
And at the same time, Saturday is an extraordinarily important date because he told Hamas that they better return all of the hostages by then, or there's going to be hell to pay. And then Netanyahu and said, I agree with him. And Netanyahu has already put troops around the border. And they're ready to go in. So Saturday we could be back into a war, a very, very escalated war against Hamas that should have been fought that way from the beginning. And I think Bibi didn't because of all of the constraints that were put on him by Biden. So everything that I hear is that Hamas is not going to return the hostages. And I think some of this was accelerated by, I'm not sure, but I think when he was coming back from the Super Bowl on Sunday night, they showed him the pictures of the 3 hostages that were just released. And one of them in particular looks like something out of the 1940s Holocaust. And I don't know if it was only the New York Post. The New York Post had a picture of a man taken about 4 days before he was taken by those animals. And he was a kind of a heavy man, not healthy, heavy man. And he looks like a skeleton now. From those horrible pictures that we remember.
Yeah.
If you've ever been to Yad Vashem. And then when you look at the others now, you realize it wasn't just him. Well, they kept this man for 400 straight days at a time. And they fed him every 3 days. So when he saw that, I think he said, what I think he would have done if he were president when this happened, which is, negotiate with him, you tell them what to do. You tell them you're going to give us all those hostages, or you're not going to be around to talk about it. None of you. Your entire nation is not going to be around. Because you're a bunch of terrorists anyway. Look, don't get liberal squishy on the Palestinians. Every single one of them is trying to kill you. In school, based on texts that were given to them by the United Nations. It's extraordinary, but that we pay for. We pay through UNRWA for the texts that say, kill the Jews. It isn't not just eliminate Israel. It's complete union with them. Remember, the Grand Mufti of that area was a good friend of yours. The Muslims, even the not so extreme Muslims, are infected with a very, very deep, vicious form of enmity.
The one and only.
Even if they're not part of Hamas,
Rouge
they want to kill the Jews. Oh, then of course that's always followed by death to America. And they have killed enormous numbers of Americans. Arafat alone killed scores and scores of Americans. So I think there's no doubt that they're going to follow through and eliminate Hamas. I would personally like to see that happen.
Former mayor. He's not the mayor anymore.
Because I think it's really,
Yeah.
and I have to believe that we're going to eventually do it. Because I don't think Trump would have given Israel the bombs that Biden had held back, the bunker plus the bombs that go deeper into the earth, that make it possible to take out their new facilities. Don't think he would have put it in Bibi's hands if he didn't. Maybe he wants them to do it, and we'll support them, and we'll be there if there are any repercussions. There are a lot of different ways to do it. But you're not going to have peace in the Middle East until you get rid of the Ayatollah, because he'll undermine any peace. But the Islamic Republic of Iran is dedicated to the elimination of the state of Israel as a political matter and as a religious matter. It's almost a basic of their constitution. So he wants to create peace in the Middle East, and I think he's gotten into it deep enough. He knows that. And exactly how he handles it, what he does first and second.
Very soon.
I personally don't think the Ayatollah will be with us next year at this time. Finally, if I ask questions, I would like you to ask me about the constitutional crisis we're going through now, where the liberal judges have decided that we don't have a chief executive.
We don't have what?
Chief executive.
Somehow, Hamilton and Madison, and they all thought they created an executive branch of the government. Hamilton in the Federalist paper number 70 said the executive has to be very strong and very powerful, and it's the only way to protect us against corruption. But the executive can't do audits. You can't find out. You can't find out. You can't find out that the U.S. AID put one of the advisors to the 9/11 terrorists in college.
Yeah.
America paid for his education. He can't find out. Oh, and they made a terrible mistake. That guy must have really stupid. I'm sorry. they found out that $50 million was spent
Condoms.
on condoms for Iraq. What a liar. We spent for condoms for Mozambique. That makes it right. Now, the prosecutor in enough cases to tell you, they did not buy 50 condoms. That's more than the population of Mozambique. They didn't buy 50 million condoms from Mozambique. Here's what we used to blow up when I was an assistant U.S. attorney. They whacked the money out.
Oh yeah.
Nobody got any condoms. Our crooks and their crooks got that money. And I'll finish by telling you the answer to the hopefully future congressman's question. The reason why the budget of Florida is 120 billion, and the budget of New York is 254 billion, and Florida has what, 8 million more people. So your budget should be higher than ours, and ours is two plus times yours. It's because we steal the money. We steal it. That money is inflated so that it goes through things that sound wonderful, like not-for-profits. Not-for-profits in New York are more crooked than any business to ever met. Because the guy's wife, the guy's political, this one, this son, and the contracts are absurd. And what Musk and his people are seeing is not incompetent. Sure, there's some incompetence in government, but most of it is corruption. And the reason it's a fight to the death is the guys fighting the most are the ones making the money. I mean, you look at a black area that's falling apart. 8 out of 10 of them have a congressman who's a multi-millionaire. And enough money has gone into that area to make it run. I mean, if they ever spent all the money they would have done Harlem would be like Dubai. But Charlie Rabbit is a fool. I can tell you the same thing in Baltimore if you want, or almost all of these phonies, like Waters. She's a multi-millionaire. She's sure to make it on her brains. So, man is doing the work of God. It had to be done. I know for years in American politics, American politicians, Democrat and Republican, would say, I'm going to go after the fraud, waste, and abuse. And then none of them do it. Well, this guy's rich enough, he doesn't give a damn. And I love that he's crooked. What the hell do you have to be crooked? There isn't enough money to corrupt him. You have to be crazy to be corrupt. Everybody was convinced that Bloomberg would be corrupt because he was so rich. This guy makes Bloomberg look like a So I think Trump made a brilliant choice, both because the guy's got an IQ that's off the charts, and he's got the guts. And he's got guts that are very cool. Just sure of himself. He's doing the right thing. So, okay. Why don't you ask whatever questions you would like to ask about any of that or all that's going on?
Mayor, we are ready for questions.
Yes.
Okay, we have David Traina here. David, ask away.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being here. I wanted to ask, what was your first thought when you got the call at 9/11?
Well, I was having breakfast at the Peninsula Hotel, which is on 54th Street in Manhattan, those of you who know. And I was having kind of a more leisurely breakfast than normal because it was primary day in New York. Republican and Democratic parties were holding the primaries for the citywide election in November. I was term limited to 2 terms. And I was having dinner, breakfast with my chief counsel, Dennis Levy, and one of our best friends. And with Bill Simon, who just was involved in the fire in California, who wanted to run for governor of California. Eventually did, almost won. He's the son of Secretary of Energy and Secretary of Treasury, son, who worked for Nixon. And we were talking about his running for governor. I was giving him advice because I didn't think I would have any real work until about 4 o'clock, because it was primary day, and then everybody would be claiming I was cheating. That happens in New York all the time. In New York, even in an election that is a definite win for the Democrats, they cheat in order to stay in shape. So, they don't want to lose the edge. So even though they know they're going to win by, 70-30, they'll cheat for an extra 10%, just in case they have to. It's like, not as bad as Philadelphia.
Okay, we have another question for you. This is one of our exclusive members, Maria Maaloof. Maria?
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mayor Giuliani, for being here. Excuse my accent. I'm Lebanese. Maybe she has the roots of Lebanon. So, given your strong stance on national security and counterterrorism, you spoke about Hamas. We just need to know, I'm a freelancer, I'm a journalist, I work for... Okay, one question. How President Trump will play a big role in defeating Hamas? The hostages is a big problem, and we need to know how we can do a collaboration with UAE, Saudi Arabia, and we are expecting a meeting to get rid of the Iranian influence.
Thank you.
Please, repeat that just...
She wants to know how you feel about...
How we can rid of the Iranian influence? Is there any sanctions on Iran, the Mullah regime?
Please, just repeat it.
Iran?
No, have her do
Can you say that?
it. No, have her.
Rebecca, you say the question.
How we...
Rebecca,
Rebecca, you say it.
summarize the question.
Rebecca, you say it. Between the mic and the accent.
She really wants to know what you think Trump is thinking about how we can make a deal with Iran and Hamas to get the hostages out now.
I think...
It's a collaboration of
Yes.
UAE and
With the
Saudi
cooperation,
Arabia.
right?
Okay.
Cooperation.
I think that he believes that his options are limited by certain things. He is not going to, he and Bibi could get the hostages out if they agree to allow Hamas to have a role in a future God. That would be like allowing the Nazis to have a role in a future Germany. That would be insane. So there are options that are cut off. And I am sure, and I know, he agrees with that. So, yeah, and I think that's the only way we're going to get Hamas to voluntarily give up the hostages.
Okay, we have another question
So
for you.
the option that he's going to use, I hope that it works, is that he's going to destroy them. There's not going to be a Hamas anymore.
God willing.
And they will, if you tell the Mossad there won't be a Hamas, there won't be a Hamas. They'll go find them wherever they got to find them. I mean,
Okay, another question for you, Mayor. This is Evie Stieglitz. She has a question.
Okay. So nice to see you again. Former New Yorker, 15 years, now Florida resident, 4 years. I'm head of the Blue State Refugee Committee. Question is, you've done this before in New York. Do you think it will happen again? Will we see that bounce back? Will we see iconic New York City again? And how will that happen?
yeah, I think so. I mean, cities, New York has certain things that are just built into it that make it a great city. Sometimes greater than others, sometimes safer than others. But it's a hard city to avoid. It's probably the most famous city in the world. So 30 years ago, you could say absolutely, because it was the financial capital of the world.
Right.
Now, finance is just, I don't know if there's a financial capital of the world. The internet is the financial capital of the world, right? And maybe even more if we go in that direction. I mean, it's all a question of political choices. Why is New York the way it is? Because for 150 years, New York is a crooked democratic dictatorship, with a few exceptions. The few times that a Republican or independent were elected. So that would be LaGuardia and me and Bloomberg in modern times. And you go back into the 19th century, you had reform movements. Like Ed Koch should be also an example of a Democrat when they had a reform movement in the Democratic Party. Nowadays, there is no reform movement in the Democratic Party. It's controlled by whoever says the craziest thing, because they all agree with it, or they keep their mouth shut. I don't understand it completely. I don't understand how intelligent people can sit by and allow AOC and the one who was married to her brother to come into the country. And these,
Bill Lamar.
yeah. I don't understand how they can do that. I mean, I've known Chuck Schumer forever, and his wife worked for me. And I consider him, I'm not Jewish, but I feel a great affinity to Israel and Jewish people. I feel like he's a traitor to his own people.
He's standing with the squad now.
Thank you so much. Okay, we have another question.
You know what happened to the Senate?
Okay.
I agree.
This is one of our newest exclusive members, Mary Bernhardt.
Hola. So Mayor, what do you think is going to be the future of the Panama Canal? As Panamanians, we're not quite sure what's going to happen. It's not clear. That's the question. Thank you.
Well, I'm not sure what's going to happen. I can tell you what I hope happens. They kick China out.
Yay.
They don't belong there. It clearly violates the treaty. You know, the amazing thing when Donald Trump said these things, of course they thought he was crazy when he said we should take over the canal, and because it's hurting the United States. We should take over Denmark. We should take over Greenland from Denmark because it needs to be defended. Now, do you know Truman wanted to take Greenland? Yeah, and so did Roosevelt during the Second World War. In fact, we occupied Greenland during the Second World War. And then when we gave it back, Truman wanted to buy it. So all of a sudden, it's like when all the Democrats were in favor of putting up a wall to stop illegal immigration, Schumer, Pelosi, and I mean, I have all their tapes. We have to have a wall. We have to have a wall. Then Trump says we have to have a wall. It's xenophobic. Lucky I don't know what xenophobic means, but I think it's bad.
That's great. Okay, we have one last question from my favorite co-president, Lauren Malice.
So, Mr. Mayor, if you could give anybody that's running for office a piece of advice right now, so they can win that seat, whatever, maybe, what would you tell them?
I would tell them, make sure your attitude in running for office is correct. That you're doing it in order to do the best job you can do for the people. And you're not doing it because you want to be important, because you're really not that much more important than anybody else. And if you think you are, there's probably something wrong with you. You're not going to make any money doing it unless you want to go to jail, I hope. Unless you're a Democrat.
Or you could be a Democrat.
But I think that's what's missing now. I remember when if I go back to the 70s and the 80s and and I was mayor, I was U.S. attorney in the 80s and mayor in the 90s. And there were lots of Democrats that I could work with, and I could appeal to them based on what's best for the country or what's best for the city. And sometimes I would have to modify my position for they would, trying to figure that out. That's almost a useless conversation now with most Democrats, because they're so afraid of the radicals in the party. And it's probably a useless conversation with a third of the people in our party. It's become a completely selfish endeavor, driven by the desire for personal power, glory, and unfortunately, greed. And we got to get it out. It has to be driven a lot more by idealism, meaning Democrat and Republican should be able to sit down and talk out. How do I solve this in the best interest of the United States? So what time is it, Ted? 8:05. What?
9.
Okay. Okay, we have 4 minutes left of the show. It's probably a 1 or 2 minute break, and then we're
We'll
going
take a 1 or 2 minute break, but you can continue to ask me questions.
Okay, this is my wonderful husband, Joe Maaloof. 41 years.
You know, when I was in New York, when you became mayor, and I was in New York, you focused on what you considered minor crimes, squeegee men and things like that. And some people didn't really understand. And then Malcolm Gladwell came out with the tipping point and explained it beautifully. The broken window theory. If you care enough about something, about the minor stuff, people won't do the major stuff. But if you look at the statistics, major crimes plummeted under your leadership. What do you make of these DAs now that are soft on crime, that are letting people out, that are no bail, that everything is decriminalized? What do you make of that as to why they're doing it? And obviously it's the opposite of common sense.
So I think the large number of them are what I call the Soros DAs, right? And they may be as many as 80 that he put in cities all over the country. A couple are Republicans, but they're almost all Democrats. I believe that was a very deliberate plot, because he did essentially the same thing in Eastern Europe, which I learned when I investigated Ukraine. He developed special prosecutors' offices in various Eastern European countries where there was a lot of corruption. He tried to do it in Romania, he tried to do it in Czech Republic, he tried to do it in Hungary, they almost killed him. He did it because the special prosecutor would then take over all the corruption prosecutions. They dropped the case on his own. And also he could then direct. He could also direct who was going to get investigated for corruption and who wasn't, which would be a great advantage for him. So I believe he put the DAs in there for 2 reasons. Reason number one, I believe he wants to see our country fractured. Not necessarily, I'm not sure the reason the communists taken over, but he, if you read the city's he is very, very anti-American. He doesn't like us. And it expresses itself in, he tries to convince us that American patriotism and nationalism is a form of Nazism. And it's very strange because the guy cooperated with the Nazis and gave up Jewish people to be killed, which probably makes him nuts. I mean, crazy. When you do that as a child and you're not guilty about it, you got to leave some kind of a pathological scar on you. Enormous. So he wants to see these cities fall apart. The first one that he put in was the DA in Philadelphia named Krasner. Since Krasner has been DA, Philadelphia has had more murders 3 different years than it ever has had its entire 250 years declines prosecution in more than half the cases, including murders. And if you look at his DAs, records set for homicide in Philadelphia, St. Louis, Rochester, New York, Chicago, you don't have to set a record. I mean, Chicago every weekend is a question of, is it 5 people killed or 20? And is it 20 people wounded or 100? And they don't do a damn thing about it. But Chicago hasn't had a non-Democrat mayor in 70 years. And they work, and then they not only vote for the Democrat mayor, they vote for the worst one. The last election, of all the people on the list of Democrats, they picked the guy that was totally crazy. This is the guy who blamed Nixon for poverty. Nixon is the reason for poverty. So, Rebecca, how are you?
I'm fantastic.
So what?
Awesome. So, first of all, thank you so much.
Thank you. Very, very enjoyable.
We are blown away by everything you were talking about. We agree with everything. You're really awesome. All I want to say is, my husband and I, we raised our children in New York. We got married in New York, raised our children in Florida. By the time 9/11 happened, we had 6 children already. Our baby.
God bless you.
Of course, it was horrible, and he did lose some people who perished in 9/11. But I also had this feeling that, you know what, we're going to be okay because our mayor is Mayor. New York City was Mayor Blair. You got rid of.
You know, there's an article in the paper, the Post has 2 articles today. You should read them. One, there's a mafia guy who, I guess, is sentenced or something. And no, it's a Sicilian mafia guy who was caught on tape, and he's complaining that they don't get good people anymore, and that they're not as good as the other organized crime groups because the quality of their recruits has gone down. It's got a morale problem like the military. I wonder if the mafia has gone. I was thinking he hasn't gone woke. The second one is an article about how people don't recognize how much Trump has elevated children in and they were talking about that beautiful ceremony when he signed he mentioned, mentioned participating with his book. Well, you shouldn't go on the ladies. I think my father told me that when I was 2. The ladies. But, and it was so beautiful the way those children used to react. And you couldn't help but think of how the kids used to be frightened. Like, particularly little girls were frightened like hell of that pervert that was there. I mean, smelling their hair, touching them. How about what you said? I used to like it when I was in the pool, and little children would touch my hair on my leg. Oh, honey. So, I think that there's a beautiful article about, and then they talk about how Musk had the kid with him, who reminded me a little of Andrew, who's not here, who reminded me of Andrew at my inauguration, who ran around and did all kinds of crazy things. And then they talked about how many children that Vance had brought his kids with him on the trip to wherever they're going. And then the Secretary of Transportation, Duffy, Sean Duffy, I campaigned for him. I mean, from way back in 2010 when he ran, and at that point they had 6 kids, now they have 11. And they had them all at the swearing in, and Trump took pictures of every single one of them. And I know because I've known him for 40 years, And I spent every day with him for 6 months or 5 months in 2016, from about April until the election. I traveled with him every day. And it was my job to cut down on his tweet. Good job. But the reality is, I came to believe after a while that plus and minus, the tweeting was plus. And now it's much better. But like what he did today, when the hell has an American president ever explained himself to the people that he's governing the way he does? I mean, even Kennedy and Reagan were great communicators. They had much more formal. I mean, he's like your pal, or friend, or enemy. He tells you what he thinks. He even changes his mind in front of you. That's exactly what a democracy should be. I mean, the press conference today was remarkable. I also think he got to the level of wisdom about nuclear war. And you can see how strongly he feels about it. You can see that he's a man with a conscience, because you can see that the weight of being able to destroy the world, he feels it. He feels it. And I worked for Ronald Reagan, and he felt it. He didn't like it, and he felt it. And if you listen to Kennedy's early speeches, you can see he. And they're the only three presidents, the others probably did, the only three that I remember really expressing it. And you want a president who has that, because it could destroy us. Conservative, Republican, like Bloomberg did a good job. And Bloomberg, now I disagree with Bloomberg on a good book.